In this lecture, we're going to go more in depth into the memory system, how neuroplasticity can affect our memory system, how we can overcome and replace memories. And the first question is it actually possible to forget bad memories? Is it possible to have bad memories and replace them with better memories that has a positive effect on you? And the question cannot be answered by a simple yes or no. Throughout the analysis of this lecture, you will find the answer yourself. Now, of course, we all have things in our past that we'd like to forget. Bad breakups, some experiences, somebody you lost, a huge failure that you went through. And no matter what you did, no matter how hard you tried, you can never forget about it. And the effect of this memory will stay with you till the rest of your life. Especially when you have a traumatic memory that had a really severe emotional effect on you. These memories can cause phobias and anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and most importantly, a biased opinion when it comes to similar experiences. And we mentioned before an example when we talked about breakups. People who had a few breakups where they were hurt, where their heart got broken, usually they would react in relationships in a similar way. So every single time they go in a new relationship, they feel like it's not working and they end up breaking up with the person thinking that the other person is the mistake, when in fact, they are being the mistake unconsciously. They are having some behaviors and they are doing a lot of things that would just push the other person away from them without even being conscious of it, because the effect of the memory on them, the heartbreak and the bad memories when it came to breakups had this effect, and now they act on an automatic basis in a way that pushes the partner away to avoid relationships. People, human beings, want to avoid pain and come closer towards joy, happiness, and positive emotions. That's just how our nature works. Now, researchers showed that you can actually change, delete, and even implement memories. There were questions about some drugs that can help with that, some psychiatry sessions, and mostly when it came to deleting or implementing memories, it was all based on psychological assessments. However, it is possible to change memories on a daily basis without seeing anybody, without seeing a psychologist or a psychotherapist or psychiatrist, without seeing anyone. You can by yourself change bad memories and turn them into good memories through the process of neuroplasticity. But as we all know, neuroplasticity is not a simple concept, and therefore, changing a bad memory and turning it into a good memory is also not a simple process. Try to think about the following scenario. Have you ever met someone and they shared a memory with you, and then some time passes by and they're telling the memory again to somebody else while you're there, and you noticed that some things changed. The memory is not the same. And then after another period of time, they tell it another time. They're trying to explain and tell the memory to someone, and they also tell it in a different way than the way they told it before and the way they told it even before that to you. So researchers actually found that people have this habit of altering memories and changing them according to their own personal opinions and biases. And it gets to a point where they actually believe that the memory, this is how the memory went. Not the way it actually went, but they believe that the way they're structuring it, this is how it actually happened. When in fact, it is not how it actually happened. This is just something that they built on top of the memory and they changed it. This usually happens, and there was a lot of jokes on it, when it comes to two people who are in a relationship when they first met. When they start talking about it, at first, they are being extremely realistic about how it happened, unless they're trying to hide something. But in general, the memory starts off with a realistic approach. I was in a coffee shop and he saw me and he wanted to talk to me. He approached me and offered to buy me a drink, yada, yada, yada. And we went out. I didn't really like him. And the story unfolds. This is how it happened. Now we're together. A year later, the story becomes, I saw a person who had a heart attack right next to me, and I was screaming for help, and then he jumped in and he saved his life, and then he asked me for a drink. Several years afterwards, they get married, and they have children, and they tell their children the story how their father saved somebody's life and met their mom, and now they're living happily ever after. But supposedly, if we had a time machine and those kids went back in time to the moment where their dad and their mom met, it's a completely different story. See, nobody had a heart attack and nobody almost died. Even further than that, a lot of people sometimes they lie about things, and they need to keep lying about it because they don't want anybody to figure out the truth. So what happens is, the more they tell this lie, the more they themselves start to believe it. So when the parents are telling this story to their kids, they're not telling it in a way that they're thinking that they're lying about the memory or they're changing it. They actually think that this is how it happened. They're not lying. It is wired in their brain that way. This is how they remember the memory. And the reason why they actually think that this is how it happened is because of neuroplasticity. Now, what if we can use this system to our advantage? I'm not saying we're gonna delete and erase a memory and it's never gonna be there. And I'm not saying we're gonna implement a new memory that's gonna change your entire perspective on life. But what I am saying is it possible or is it practical to change a memory into another memory? To kind of replace a memory by another memory by keeping some key factors and pinpoints there. Going back to our example, the dad offering their mom a drink is a key point. Their dad asking her out is a key point. The coffee shop is a key point. But what happened in between is not, and this is where the scenario changed. And going back to another example when we talked about breakups, you remember the pinpoints. You remember the fights, you remember how you guys broke up, you remember how you felt about it, but you don't really think about what happened in between. And most of the times you change the scenario. If two people broke up, you talk to one person, he has a story, and then you talk to the other person, and he has a completely different story. And we just say, yeah, each and every person has his own point of view. Of course, each person will alter the story based on their personal interest. So when you go through several breakups and you keep remembering how your heart got broken and how you guys broke up and how you felt about it, when the scenario is always the same, you thinking that the other person is the problem. Nobody understands me. I have a really difficult lifestyle that nobody can keep up with. I have a mentality that is different from everybody else and it's hard for people to understand it. And what's happening is that you're hiding behind your thumb. You are changing the story, you're changing the memory based on your own personal interest. But when you pause for a second and you think about that night when you called her and you were freaking out because she didn't answer, she wasn't answering her phone for an hour. That time you freaked out because she put a picture and she got a comment from a guy. That time when you guys were supposed to go out, but you stood her up because you wanted to hang out with your boys. You don't look at these things because this is not your interest. You don't want to look like you're the bad guy here. And what happens is you start believing it. You start believing that the problem is not you. It's always the other person. But what if the scenario was different? What if you understood that what happened, what you did, was the problem? When you start being realistic, or you start being unrealistic, as we're going to see later on, everything is going to change. The next time you're going to go into a relationship, you're not going to go with a mind or a brain that is wired in a way that is going to always look at what the other person is doing wrong. But in fact, it's going to start looking at what you're doing wrong. And when you start seeing what you're doing wrong, you're going to start working on fixing it. And this will lead to a healthy, beneficial relationship. So how do we do it? How do we replace bad memories with good memories? The goal is to have weaker links to bad memories and stronger links to good memories, or memories that you might create that are actually beneficial for you. And I'm going to explain later, and you guys are going to understand what I'm talking about. So first and foremost, avoid objects and places that triggers the memory. Neuroplasticity has to happen at one point. In order for these neurons to fire, there needs to be something that would trigger them, something that would start the process of this memory in your brain over and over again. So usually there's a trigger. You seeing pictures of couples that are happy together. You watching a love movie, a dramatic romance movie. You restlessly looking for a partner that would understand you and not finding anybody. And every time you don't, you start remembering all the bad things that happened. So what's happening is you're not creating a healthy thought pattern when it comes to these memories at all. Now, sometimes you can avoid the trigger completely. Just stop watching these romantic, sad, dramatic movies that always ends with a happy ending of the two people who are in love getting together, because most of the times you need to keep in mind that this is a movie and it's different than reality. Even movies that are based on a real story. You know how many times I watched ghost movies that are based on real stories, when in fact, most probably it's BS. But just being able to avoid these triggers, you will recall the memory less and less, hence not giving the chance for the neurons to have a stronger link together and make this memory stronger and stronger and stronger. Sometimes the memory just comes back because of a certain trigger, and just by eliminating this trigger, you're good to go. If every now and then a certain song comes up on your phone, a song that you shared with your partner before, and every time it comes up, you start remembering the partner and everything, even though it's been years, you can simply delete this song from your playlist. And by avoiding this trigger, you avoided having the memory again and again. Just by simply eliminating the trigger, you are making the memory weaker and weaker. And as we said before, if you don't use them, you lose them. So when you don't use these memories, you're going to start losing them. You're going to start losing the connection and the link between neurons, and therefore losing the memory and its effect on you. But if the trigger is unavoidable, if it's your bedroom and everything happened in your bedroom, and every time you step into your bedroom you remember, there are other things to do to take advantage of your neuroplasticity to change and alter a memory. Become conscious of the memory before it becomes unconscious. Most people, they have recalls and memories without being conscious that they are having a memory. When you think about somebody you broke up with, you don't pause for a second and think, oh, I'm thinking about this memory about a certain person I broke up with and I don't like it. You just remember and you start filling up with emotions, and before you know it, you feel sad. These emotions of sadness will put you in a bad mood, and the next day when somebody asks you, why are you in a bad mood? You just say, I don't know, man, I just woke up like that. But if you were conscious of your memory, you were conscious that yesterday night, this song that was on your phone made you remember your breakup, and now you're just not feeling okay because all of these emotions came back. It's a completely different story. This is exactly why mindfulness is extremely important. I think there is no part in this course where we didn't talk about mindfulness and meditation, because the first step to master your plastic brain is to become mindful, to be able to control and be aware of everything that's going on in your brain, all the thought patterns and emotions and moods you're having. And the thing is, a lot of people sometimes know that a certain memory brings them bad feelings, so they try to avoid it as much as possible. But there's a very interesting psychological concept that says the following: rejection breeds obsession. The more you try to reject the memory, the more you try to avoid it, the more your brain will think about it, the more you will become obsessed about it, and the more it will affect you. Because when it does pop up in your brain again, You're not just going to feel bad about what happened, but you're also going to feel bad about the fact that the memory came back to you again after trying to avoid it, after not wanting to remember this at all. When you're trying to break a habit and you fail and you do the old habit again, you feel bad. You feel angry at yourself. And this is just our nature. So believe it or not, instead of trying to push the memory out of your brain, thinking about it in a conscious way would actually help. When you spend years trying to avoid the pain and it just keeps coming back in truckloads, if you pause for a second and you just let yourself remember what happened, let yourself get angry, let yourself become sad without judging, let the emotions flow. Instead of them catching you off guard, let them happen consciously. Let yourself feel these emotions. Because when you do, there's no rejection and there's acceptance. Most people come up with advices when you have a bad memory and you're trying to forget it. Most people would give this advice, this stupid yet very wise advice saying you just need to accept it and move on. And I went through this before, and I can tell you that you're not going to listen to them. You're going to nod and say, okay, but deep down you're going to be thinking like, if it was as easy as just accepting the memory and moving on, I would have done that a long time ago. So there must be something else going on. Now, most people, when they give this advice, they don't give it the right way. Because the big question is, how can I accept this memory? Well, you accept it by stopping the rejection. You accept it when you start consciously thinking about this memory, letting it sink in, feeling the emotions, remembering the details, even though it hurts, even though I'm pretty sure some memories will hurt a lot. But when you let yourself react to it in an honest way, when you let yourself feel it, and even if you got mad, even if you cried, this is what your body, this is what your brain needs. When you think about it and you feel a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow, when you feel like you're so angry, you want to punch the wall or you start crying, this is a sign that your brain needed that. And you were trying for so long to avoid this, when in fact, your brain needed this. And every single time the memory comes back to you, your brain is trying to say, I have something, there's something trapped inside that needs to go out. And you need to make it happen. Otherwise, your brain will not be at ease. Your brain will not rest until you either have this memory that goes from your conscious mind to your unconscious mind, or you just let it be, you let it sink in, and you really feel the emotions and accept them. Once you stop rejecting these memories, you will start accepting them. So don't focus on accepting the memory and moving on. Just focus on feeling the memory. Don't avoid it. Feel it consciously. Let yourself on purpose remember this memory and let all the feelings out. A lot of times when there's a lot of pressure in life, and of course, most of you can relate, most of us don't just crack under pressure when something happens, even if it's, especially when it's not significant, but it builds up. Something happens, you start struggling financially, and then you feel like your relationship with your girlfriend is not working really well. You start noticing that, for example, your grades are not as high as before, and all of these would kind of pile up together, and eventually you crack. You start crying and you get angry and you get mad and you talk to people about it, only to realize that you actually feel better. After you cry, after you punch this wall, you feel better. Now, I'm not trying to say to anybody that you need to punch the wall so hard that you break it. What I'm saying is you need to let these emotions flow. Stop trying to control these emotions, because when you do try to control these emotions, you're just making it worse. And the second thing is not to just be aware of the memory itself, but be aware of the emotions. Because as we said, you're not trying to reject the memory anymore, and you let the emotions and the feelings just sink in and you just let them go. There's going to be a flow of emotions inside of you as soon as you start thinking about this memory. Now, here's where it becomes really interesting. We often talked about the concept of how the human nature wants to avoid pain and goes towards happiness, joy, and just avoiding pain at all costs because we just hate the feeling and we don't want it. And when you think about a bad memory for 10 seconds and it makes you feel bad for the next 10 hours, after maybe half an hour, you will not be conscious that you're feeling bad because of this memory. But when you consciously think about it, and when you are conscious about your emotions, when you know that you're feeling sad, when you know that this is bringing you a lot of negative emotions on a conscious level, what your brain will do is that it will try to avoid these emotions at all costs. And in order for it to avoid these emotions, it will have to avoid the main reason, which is the memory itself. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking that, of course, we said before that the more you use emotions, the stronger the link will become. And the more you think about something, the stronger it will become and the stronger the link between neurons will be. So how come if you think about memories on a conscious level and you feel the emotions to such a huge extent, you will actually weaken the link between neurons? And that's a really good question. But first things first, we need to realize that before thinking about this memory on a conscious level and letting the emotions sink in and feeling them, the link is getting stronger day by day because you are thinking about it and then you're feeling bad about it without having any specific reason in your mind. This memory is slowly shifting from your conscious mind to your unconscious mind. And every time you remember it and you feel bad for the next 10 hours, even though you're not aware of it, this link is getting stronger. We're not aware of every single thing that's happening in our brain. We're not aware of how the structuring between neurons and neural networks is happening. But these emotions that you had for 10 hours because of a certain memory that happened that triggered it 10 hours ago, it is getting stronger in your brain. The link is getting stronger. But when you think about it and you let it sink in and you just stop rejecting it and you just let it flow for half an hour, when you calm down after this half hour of rage or intense crying or feelings, you're going to calm down and you're not going to think about it again. You're not giving it the chance to affect you for a long time. You're not giving it the chance to put you in a bad emotional state for the next 24 hours. You're not giving it the chance to turn this bad emotional state into a bad mood that would last for a week. And when you remember the memory consciously and you feel all these bad emotions, and then when you calm down and you stop thinking about the memory, you start having good feelings, feelings of acceptance, feelings of calmness, and feelings of joy that you actually feel relief. Your brain will start linking, as we said, the bad memory to a lot of bad emotions and moods, and it will start linking forgetting these memories to feeling of relief, calmness, and happiness. Now, moving on to the third method, altering memories to your advantage. Trick your mind into it and use happy memories. And this is one of the most fascinating techniques when it comes to memory and neuroplasticity. You've probably heard about a quote that says, "Fake it till you make it." And we mentioned before the story of the parents who got married that started at a random coffee shop that turned into saving somebody's life. And in previous lectures, we said how the mind cannot really identify the difference between imagination and reality. That's why a memory that happened in the past can have effects on you in the present moment. Even though it's something that happened before and can never change, your mind would consider it as something that is happening right now because of your imagination. So a quick example would be, instead of thinking how your girlfriend broke up with you, thinking about how your friends supported you when this happened is you altering the bad memory and transforming it into a good memory. You link this breakup to the memory of your friends supporting you. You alter this memory from feelings of hopelessness and sadness to emotions of confidence, reliability, feeling that you have support and you have people around you that are there to help you and it will make you feel better. So every time a trigger comes up, and you consciously understand and know the memory and the emotions that comes with it, you alter your thinking towards your friends supporting you, all the good things that happened. How this gave you the freedom to pursue your career or to do something that you've never done before. How this breakup changed you into starting to exercise and having fitness goals that are taking you places. I mentioned the example of my professor in previous lectures where he wanted to marry this girl and her father refused because he wasn't really wealthy and he couldn't support a family. But when he told us the story, so he was thinking about this memory consciously and explaining it to us, he didn't say that he was so sad about it. He didn't say how it broke his heart. What he said is that this relationship that ended in him having his heart broken and him feeling a lot of bad emotions gave him the chance to exceed in his career, and now he's making so much money that he doesn't even care about what happened back then. And the reason why he's so in ease with this memory is first because he's conscious of it, and this is exactly why he can tell this memory, he can explain it to people without feeling bad. And second thing is because he did not always focus on the negative, which is how he got hurt and all the bad emotions, but he altered this bad memory into a good memory. How this, instead of this being the end of the relationship, this was the beginning of his career. So on a neuroplasticity level, what's happening is the following. Your neurons had this link together when it came to this past memory, and this link brought a lot of bad emotions. This link would always fire, starting with a trigger, and then the emotions would start to flow as we move on with the memory and think about it. Now, once you became conscious of it, once you became conscious of the emotions, and you let yourself remember and you let the emotions sink in, what's happening at first is that you are not making the link stronger, you're making the link weaker because you're not giving it control over you, you are giving yourself control over it. And then you're altering this bad memory and turning it into a happy memory. You are not looking at the half empty glass. You are looking at the half full glass of water. Now, these neurons linked together form a neural structure. And this entire neural structure is what's causing this disruption in emotions. Everything that happens from when you start thinking about the memory all the way to you having bad emotions and eventually bad mood is all linked together. But when you start altering into good memories, the trigger is still there. The neural structure is not entirely changing, but neurons are starting to link to other neurons, and the link to the previous neurons is becoming weaker. Then the neural network, keeping the pinpoints that we talked about at the beginning of the lecture, keeping this keystone pinpoints that are essential as the coffee shop or as offering to buy her a drink, they are still there, but they are being linked to other neurons that triggers different emotions and different feelings, usually feelings and emotions of happiness and joy. And the second part in altering memories to your advantage, which can be a little bit harder, is you simply lying to yourself. Every time you remember the breakup, don't think about yourself, even if after the breakup you felt so sad and you were crying and you felt like the world is coming to an end. Lie to yourself. Keep the pinpoints there, keep the scenario of the breakups there, but change your reaction. Imagine yourself, instead of crying, imagine yourself smiling. Instead of remembering all the bad feelings that you had, try to remember good feelings. Try to put in some good feelings, even if you're faking it. Try to imagine yourself after the breakup feeling like you're on top of the world, feeling like you're the happiest man ever, feeling that you were just sick of this relationship and you just wanted to move on, and as soon as it ended, you felt awesome. So every single time you remember this thing, you start altering your feelings and you start altering the memory into whatever story you created in your mind. And even when you tell people this story, you tell it in a way that, yeah, I was in a relationship, When you meet somebody new, most probably they're going to ask you about your previous relationships. So when you talk about it and say, yeah, we broke up, but you know what? It was a good thing that it happened. I felt a lot of relief afterwards, even though it was a bit hard, but I really felt better after we broke up. I think it was a really toxic relationship, and now that it's over, I feel way better, and I never want to go back there. And I repeat, even if you're lying, because at the end of the day, morally speaking, it's not good to lie to people, but you're lying to yourself here. You're trying to help yourself and saying that you felt good and you went out of a toxic relationship, and instead of saying you were depressed and you were crying, cannot be considered as a lie, because this has nothing to do with how the other person's perspective is going to change. If anything, the person's perspective is going to be better. And the fact that you're actually saying this is making it wired in your brain that this will actually become your reality. Next time you break up with someone, you're not going to cry, because you have all these memories back then of you breaking up and feeling good about it and feeling that you know you're doing the right choice, and this is happening to your advantage and not happening to and against your advantage. It will become hardwired in your brain and it will become simply your reality. And I know it seems really simple, and in fact it is. The only thing that it needs is you actually feeling the emotions, because if you just think about, oh no, I felt really good about it, when in fact you're feeling like shit at the moment, this will not help you. And second thing is consistency. Every time you have this memory, you keep repeating the same scenario that you created. You keep remembering the positive scenario that you created, or you use what we talked about before and you looked at the full half of the cup. You think about the advantage of the breakup, how instead of this being the end of the relationship, this being the start of your career. And with emotions, with the right emotions, and with consistency, you will start altering the bad memory and turning it into a good memory. And lastly, if this memory went from the conscious level to the subconscious level, when you have behaviors that you can't seem to control and you just don't know why, when you have a certain obsession or you have a phobia, then using these techniques is not going to be as effective. With enough consistency and repetition and good emotions, you can definitely make it, but it's going to take a longer time. So getting the help or the support you need is something you need to consider. If you feel like you just, after trying all these techniques, that it's still something that you can't really control, you might want to get the help or the support that you need from professionals. As much as we can control what's happening on a conscious level, which is exactly what we're doing, when it comes to our subconscious mind, it takes a while to understand what's going on, and it takes a while to rewire what's happening in the subconscious mind. A part of these previous techniques that we talked about would deal with the subconscious mind, but it all depends on how strong the link is. When it comes to phobias and obsessions, the link is way stronger than just feeling sad about a breakup that you had or feeling insecure about a certain financial situation that you were in. And that brings us to the end of this lecture.